Hello, my name is Kenneth Braswell. I'm with Fathers Incorporated, and I'm here at the Today's Child Conference with Toni Blackman. She is the first hip-hop ambassador for the U.S. Department of State. She's traveled around the world, and she uses her talents to expose to the world the atrocities that are happening not only in Africa and in the Congo, but around the rest of the world, and there's much that we can learn from her. Toni, can you tell me a little bit about your work?
Well, I started doing work as a cultural ambassador officially in 2000, 2001, but I've been doing this work, I guess, for much of my life where I've always believed that hip-hop could be a tool for social change and that we could use hip-hop because it is an art form as a way to make people's lives better and to promote healing. And that's basically what I do. I do hip-hop education work. I teach master classes on freestyling and improvisation. I do performance coaching. I teach creative writing. And I also do a lot of work where I perform and collaborate. I'm really excited about the work I'm doing in Africa, where I collaborate with African hip-hop artists and singers and traditional musicians, as well as producers who are not from the U.S.
Okay. You know, we don't think a lot about the industry of hip-hop having the impact that it's having around the world. Its impact of influence, its impact of how other cultures are changing, its impact on how youth in other countries are receiving and how they're interpreting what the lyrics of these songs are. What are you seeing about the impact of hip-hop in the countries that you visit?
Well, it's amazing because hip-hop has been circulating around the world for a couple of decades now. When African Bambaataa traveled to Asia and Rocksteady Crew was traveling and performing, I mean, they planted the seeds, and then artists continued to tour and to travel. And there was an era when hip-hop really provided a foundation for the voiceless in these other countries. Oftentimes you'll find that the political content, the socially conscious content in other places is much more present because the necessity is very obvious and in your face, and so there's more of a balance. But you also, now the more I travel, my ears are challenged because the younger artists are being influenced by mainstream entertainment. I don't call it art, but mainstream entertainment that's coming from the U.S. market and promoting, you know, values of materialism, consumerism, misogyny, violence against women, violence against one's community and even oneself. And so it's fascinating because a lot of hip-hoppers here in the U.S. don't understand how powerful they are.
Yeah. You know, I was at a conference over the last couple of days, and two of the people that attended this conference was Russell Simmons and Andre Harrell. And seeing the two of them in the same room, I could not help but going back to Crush Groove and reflecting on that movie and the impact that both Crush Groove and movies like, oh my goodness, Beat Street and those movies, Wild Style, that had on the culture, and particularly those of us who were young, right? You know, so I was reflecting and saying to myself, my God, you know, that was over 30 years ago, you know, that those movies came out. What do you believe has been the disconnect from that hip-hop culture to today's hip-hop culture?
Well, I think the only disconnect is that values shifted. And the values shifted to profits before people. And the values shifted to the music doesn't matter unless it's making money. And it's neglectful and disrespectful to the tradition, the African oral tradition that comes from the Caribbean, from Trinidad and Jamaica, from Puerto Rico, from Cuba, from Senegal and Ghana and West Africa and South Africa, this tradition that is rooted in centuries of storytelling and poetry and performance and music that played a functional role in our lives. That it played the role of worshiping and for praise and for celebration and for honoring certain rituals and ceremonies such as a child's birth or a parent's death. And we've forgotten that that's what music is supposed to do, and it should touch the soul. And so there was some sort of transitional space where music became a commodity and people forgot that music is an art, that it's a craft, and that it is a vehicle for channeling spirit and communicating with the ancestors and with God.
Okay. Let's take a shift for a moment, because we also know that music, and particularly hip-hop, influences our family moralities. And we have a struggle today with our youth around family moralities and what our lyrics are saying to our children and how our children are interpreting these lyrics and then how they act them out in their lives. You spoke to us a little while ago about your work in the Congo. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, I was in the Democratic Republic of the Congo a couple years ago, and the assignment was to create music and to honor International Violence Against Women's Day, ending this violence against women. And I worked with a Congolese-based artist and leader in the hip-hop community by the name of Lexus Legal. And we coordinated a residency with about 20 artists, MCs, singers, and some raga-style chat artists, and then another 20 dancers. And the whole idea was to create music that could serve, music videos and songs that could serve as PSAs, because music is more effective than a speech. And that's what we did. And it's very powerful the way these music videos work. And I've been showing them here in the U.S. when I do workshops and conferences. And I often look out and I see girls crying because it's like touches them. And that's something that music has the power to do that, Stop Doing That doesn't.
Yeah, there's a movement in this country now to look at the responsibility of men and to look at where father absenteeism is affecting our communities and how men are relating to women, how children are relating to single moms, how they are reflecting on the absence of their fathers and positive male role models in their lives. And you talked a little bit about the atrocities of women in the Congo and how they're being used as weapons or principles or whatever of war. And while those kind of things don't happen in the U.S., we can see similar trends where we are struggling with how men and women relate. Can you speak to that?
Well, I think, oftentimes because we don't see this extreme of a soldier with a gun raping a woman, we neglect to realize the severity of our situation, and we neglect to realize the crisis. For instance, I was just in Botswana, and so Botswana has, I think, maybe the second highest HIV rates in terms of the world, and the percentage of the youth population that's being infected. And while I was there, Lisa Fager from the Congressional Black Caucus posted on my Facebook page, and she's like, Toni, did you know that if Black America was a nation in Africa, that we would be number 3? I didn't know that. Wow. And so we would be number 3, and we would beat out 17 other African countries in terms of the crisis with HIV. And a lot of times this crisis is occurring because women are being in situations where they're being forced, they're being coerced, they're being persuaded, and where the woman becomes the only one that's supposed to be responsible for safe sex. And so it's not a partnership. And so if the woman slips, then it's just on, and there is unsafe sex.
Right. So as we talk about this notion of responsibility, and we hear so much more about what's happening to women, from your vantage point, what is it that we can do for men? How can we talk to men? How can we encourage men? And how can we use women and mothers to help us with basically their children? Men are their children. We disconnect that sometimes. We disconnect that these men are someone's child. But how do we send a message, and what should those messages be with regards to responsibility of men?
Well, I think there's like a whole level of programming. One of the challenges is that, so you have this movement of women there may be a feminist movement of women fighting for women's rights, and we women have to make sure that male voices are in that fight as well. And so when men are organizing, and the men who are the leaders in this male responsibility movement, they have to make sure that women's voices are present. And women's voices have to be present on the panels, and that mothers have to be able to speak, and that mothers may need tips from the men who are fathers, not necessarily fathers to their children, but who are fathers who can share with them. And so it's like a two-way communication that needs to take place in terms of making sure that both voices are heard in both arenas. And I don't think that happens enough. It's like we separate.
No, it doesn't. Toni, thank you so much. Great insight. Good luck in your work.
Thank you.
We are where you need our voices. Call on us. We can lend, those voices, to your work. Do you have any final thoughts?
No.
No.